Our reading today is found in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 18 through chapter 17, verse 7. This is the word of Yahweh. You shall appoint judges and officials throughout your tribes and all your towns that Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, and they shall render just decisions for the people. You must not distort justice. You must not show partiality, and you must not accept bribes, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. Justice, and only justice, you shall pursue, so that you may live and occupy the land that Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. You shall not plant any tree as a sacred pole beside the altar that you make for Yahweh your Elohim, nor shall you set up a stone pillar, things that Yahweh your Elohim hates. You must not sacrifice to Yahweh your Elohim an ox or a sheep that has a defect, anything seriously wrong, for that is abhorrent to Yahweh your Elohim. If there is found among you in one of your towns that Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, a man or woman who does what is evil in the sight of Yahweh your Elohim, and transgresses his covenant by going to serve other Elohim and worshipping them, whether the sun or the moon or any of the hosts of heaven, which I have forbidden, and if it is reported to you, or you hear of it, and you make a thorough inquiry, and the charge is proved true that such an abhorrent thing has occurred in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or that woman who has committed this crime, and you shall stone the man or woman to death. On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses the death sentence shall be executed. A person must not be put to death on the evidence of only 1 witness. The hands of the witnesses shall be the first raised against the person to execute the death penalty, and afterward the hands of all the people. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. Why has the one true God prohibited the worship of all other deities, entities, heavenly bodies, or other created things? The answer to that question in Hebrew is Zedek. Zedek has been translated into English in several different ways depending on the context in which it's been used. Zedek has been translated as just or justice, as it is in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 20, or as honest or right or vindication or deliverance or victory, or even as truth. But in essence, Zedek refers to rightness or righteousness. When God said to Israel through Moses, Zedek and only Zedek you shall pursue, God was telling the people that the first and only responsibility of all who would make decisions and judgments in Israel was to do what was right, without considering how well known an accused person may be or how much a person might offer to pay for a favorable verdict. In the Greek translation of the First Testament, the Greek word that most often translates the Hebrew word group built upon the core consonants of Zedek is the word dikaiosune. This is the idea to which Jesus was referring when he said the following in Matthew chapter 5, verse 6 and verse 10. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. And then verse 10. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In these verses, Jesus has declared that in the kingdom of heaven, those who have longed for righteousness, that is, justice on the earth, will eat their fill, and those who are persecuted on earth because they pursue what is right and just will be welcomed in. These declarations of Jesus are reflective of those God made through Moses, that all who judge in Israel should pursue only righteousness, only justice, only Zedek. The challenge posed by these teachings, however, is significant. After all, Zedek, righteousness or justice, is often in the eye of the beholder. What is just and right? Well, that often depends on the society or the culture or the community or sometimes the family or even the individual who is either seeking it or dispensing it. So I'll use the terms justice or righteousness interchangeably because they are interchangeable in both the First and the New Testaments, since both English words are contained in the one Hebrew word, Zedek, and the one Greek word, dikaiosune. An individual person's sense of rightness or justice can be idiosyncratic, that is, specific to that individual, or it can be informed by the person's upbringing, or it can be informed by the person's culture, or it can be informed by the penal law of the person's nation. Oftentimes, our own innate senses of right and wrong, of justice and injustice, are informed by all of these things. For instance, in my own cultural context, in the United States of America, one of the rights guaranteed for me as a United States citizen in our Bill of Rights is the freedom of religion. The First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States reads as follows: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's the end of the quotation. So, given this, many Americans have come to believe that the so called separation of church and state, and the right of all people to observe any religion they choose and to exercise that religion, many take those to be inalienable human rights, and further, that any attempt to outlaw or curtail these rights are immoral and unjust actions. However, as we've seen in our reading today from Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 2 and following, freedom of religion was not a right under the covenant of Sinai. Quite to the contrary, the exercise of any religion other than the religion of ancient Israel as established by the covenant of Sinai was forbidden. Even more, any individual found guilty of this crime by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses was to be executed by stoning. By the standards of the Constitution of the United States, this commandment in the covenant of Sinai would be considered unjust. However, by the covenant of Sinai, idolatry is unjust, and even more, it fell into a category of unlawful behavior that required capital punishment. So when God said through Moses that his people were to pursue justice and only justice, Zedek and only Zedek, and when Jesus said that those who hunger and thirst for justice, dikaiosune, will have their fill of it in the kingdom of heaven, and that those who suffer in their pursuit of justice in this world will be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven, of what justice do they speak? Can the teachings of Moses and of Jesus be decontextualized from their context in the culture of ancient Israel and recontextualized in any culture or perspective a person may wish? Was Moses commending anyone who read his words to pursue whatever behaviors seemed just to them? Was Jesus promising that whatever actions a person may believe to be just will be upheld in the kingdom of heaven, and that whoever pursues their own sense of justice will be blessed when the kingdom of heaven comes? No, neither Moses nor Jesus was making any of these promises. In the context of the covenant of Sinai, justice was determined by God, not by human beings. Moses was exhorting all who judged in Israel to do right by the terms of the covenant of Sinai, and therefore to do what was right in God's eyes. Likewise, Jesus was promising his disciples that those who hungered and thirsted for God's justice to be done on earth as it is in the heavens will be filled in the kingdom of heaven, and similarly, that those who suffer in their pursuit of God's justice on earth will be welcomed into the kingdom of the heavens. Even more, just as Moses' exhortation to justice was made in the midst of the covenant of Sinai, so Jesus' promises were made in the context of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapters 5 through 7, a passage in which Jesus has provided his disciples with God's intentions for the stipulations of the covenant of Sinai, allowing disciples of Jesus to live not only by the letter of the law, but by its truest spirit. In fact, a critical profession of both First and New Testaments is the acknowledgement that human justice is highly subjective and therefore erratic and unstable. For instance, Proverbs chapter 21 verse 2 reads as follows: All deeds are right in the sight of the doer, but Yahweh weighs the heart. And St. Paul the Apostle warned the church as follows in 2 Timothy chapter 4 verses 3 through 4. For the time is coming when people will not put up with sound doctrine, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own desires, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander away to myths. Beneath these exhortations is the biblical insistence that God, not human beings or human cultures or human societies, is the one who defines what is just and right. Even more, It is God who will judge finally all those who have claimed to do justice upon the earth. So, to say it more plainly, God has not called us to pursue and to do what seems just and right to us. Instead, God has called us to pursue and do what He has told us is just and right. Now, of course, we are free to do otherwise. But as a friend once said to me, we are free to make our choices, but we are not free to choose our consequences. Those who are truly disciples of Jesus will seek first God's kingdom and God's righteousness, not their own or that espoused by their family, culture, or nation. Those who are truly disciples of Jesus will pray to the Father, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in the heavens." Those who are truly disciples of Jesus will allow the teachings and example of Jesus and his prophets and apostles to re-educate them in terms of what is truly just and truly right. And this insistence is at the heart of Moses' instructions with respect to proper worship of God in the passage we're considering today. First, God told the people in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verses 21 through 22, "You shall not plant any tree as a sacred pole beside the altar that you make for Yahweh your Elohim, nor shall you set up a stone pillar, things that Yahweh your Elohim hates." The planting of trees or the setting up of stone pillars as sacred pillars, often dedicated to a facet of nature or to an ideology associated with a god or a goddess, was not just in God's sight. These were unjust acts. The people were not to receive instruction on how to worship their God from the surrounding cultures. They were to worship God only in the ways God Himself had instructed them. To do otherwise was unjust. It was unrighteous. It was not right. Then Moses continued in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 1. "You must not sacrifice to Yahweh your Elohim an ox or a sheep that has a defect, anything seriously wrong, for that is abhorrent to Yahweh your Elohim." So furthermore, God considers it unjust, that is morally wrong, to offer something to God that is not useful to us or that we find less desirable than our other possessions. To do this is an abomination to God. The Hebrew word translated into English as abomination is the word toivah, which was used to describe behaviors which led God to set apart the then current inhabitants of the land of Canaan for destruction. Anything offered to God must be our best, and never simply what is left, or what is of less value to us. St. Paul applied this principle even to the work we do with our hands in service of human employers. He wrote the following in Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 through 24. "Whatever your task, put yourselves into it, as done for the Lord and not for your masters, since you know that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You serve the Lord Christ." Returning now to Deuteronomy chapter 17, Moses also reminded the people that what was and what wasn't appropriate to worship was determined not by the cultures surrounding Israel, nor by the Israelites themselves, but by God. Let's recall Moses' words in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 2 through 7. "If there is found among you in one of your towns that Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, a man or woman who does what is evil in the sight of Yahweh your Elohim, and transgresses his covenant by going to serve other Elohim and worshiping them, whether the sun or the moon or any of the host of heaven which I have forbidden, and if it is reported to you or you hear of it, and you make a thorough inquiry, and the charges prove true that such an abhorrent thing has occurred in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or that woman who has committed this crime, and you shall stone the man or woman to death. On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses the death sentence shall be executed. A person must not be put to death on the evidence of only one witness. The hands of the witnesses shall be the first raised against the person to execute the death penalty, and afterward the hands of all the people. So you shall purge the evil from your midst." In these verses, Moses has insisted that no other thing or being in all creation should be worshipped. The Hebrew word translated into English as worship in this verse is the verb shachah. Shachah refers to the act of bowing down or prostrating oneself before someone or something. It's often used to describe the posture a person might take before a ruler or a person in authority. Shachah describes the act of venerating a person or paying homage to someone or something. God's command through Moses is that no aspect of creation, such as the sun or the moon, should be honored in this way. Even more, God also commanded that they never pay this kind of respect to the host of heaven. In Hebrew, this phrase, Tzivah Hashemayim, refers to the spiritual beings God has created, beings which today we would call angels or demons. For instance, the phrase has been used by the prophet Micaiah in 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 19, which reads as follows: Then Micaiah said, Therefore hear the word of Yahweh. I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne with all the host of heaven standing beside him to the right and to the left of him. It becomes clear later in the context that these are beings, that they are spirits. Due to this, the phrase is often translated into English as heavenly host or heavenly armies. So not only has God prohibited his people from paying homage to aspects of creation, but he has also commanded his people not to pay homage to any spiritual being other than himself. The essence of this teaching is that only Yahweh is to be honored as a God, as something or someone worthy of praise, adoration, and service. To do otherwise is unjust in God's eyes. It is unrighteous. It is, to use Moses' words, an abomination. May all who seek to follow the one true God of all creation as disciples of Jesus remember that the justice, the righteousness to which we are called and which we are encouraged to pursue is not that of our nation or our culture or our family or even our own consciences. The justice to which we are called and which we are encouraged by Jesus to pursue is the justice of God. As we have been charged in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 7, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear Yahweh and turn away from evil. May those who have ears to hear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Amen.